Hello and welcome to Do You Remembaer? This is an ongoing video series where every week I take a look at something on the internet, often a Wikipedia article, and I do my best to remember everything I read about that article, and then I share it with you. And hopefully you like it. In the comments below, you can let me know what I got right and what I got wrong, if I missed anything, and if you want to suggest a topic that I do some research on, hasty research, feel free to include that. Give me a link or just say like, hey, you should look up this. And if you have a site outside of Wikipedia you think I should read an article on, feel free to share that as well. Can't promise I'll do it, but I certainly would like to. Anyway, this week we're talking about Late Night with Conan O'Brien, the TV show that Conan hosted from 1993 till 2009. Uh, and we'll get into what happened after that a little bit. We're focusing on Late Night. We're talking about the show. How did this happen? How did this Simpsons and SNL writer, whose only performance was a few seconds here and there on SNL in the background, how did this man become the heir apparent to David Letterman? How did that even happen? Well, it's about promises made and expectations unfulfilled. In 1992, Johnny Carson retired from the Tonight Show, wasn't going to do it anymore. He was hosting that. David Letterman, for 10, 12 years, something like that, hosted the Late Night with David Letterman after that on NBC. And I think pretty rightfully assumed that Letterman assumed that he was going to take over the Tonight Show, move up, stay in the same network, and go to the Tonight Show. But NBC was like, well, Letterman's ratings are very, very good, and we should just keep him there. And we're going to bring in Jay Leno, who has covered and guest hosted the Tonight Show. So we're going to bring him in. And Letterman was not pleased with this decision. And so he left and went to CBS. Of course, he couldn't call it Late Night, so it's the Late Show. And he ran against Leno in the early time slot. And was able to keep, because he was producing the show, was able to keep a lot of the segments and style. And it's in many ways the same show. Anyway, so NBC was not prepared for that. They were not prepared to replace Letterman after they just replaced Leno. I had to pause the recording there because there was a weird noise. It's okay now. Anyway, so Dana Carvey and Gary Shandling said, no, we don't want to do Late Night. But maybe Jon Stewart would be right for the job. Maybe Drew Carey would be right for the job. And so they're auditioning because at this point, Lorne Michaels has taken over producing this new show. And Lorne Michaels is like, what about Conan? He had written for SNL and is writing for The Simpsons and did not have television experience, but Lorne Michaels saw something in him. So they bring him in. Jason Alexander is the person that he interviews for this tryout, and they offer it to Conan. Conan gets the job. Conan's going to be the new late night host. Andy Richter is brought on as a Chicago improviser and performer. Is brought on to be a co-host. A lot of the writing staff are also Chicago folks. Robert Smigel is going to be head writer. Early on in those years, you're going to have there's tons of writers come and go, but you're going to have some of your mainstays, and I'll just say them now: Brian Stack, Brian McCann, John Glazer, Andy Blitz, Kevin Dorff, a Chicagoan. So some of the folks are Chicago folks, other folks are from other places, but these are going to be early great writers, along with Robert Smigel, who you know is the voice of Triumph, the insult comic dog. And the very first guest is John Goodman, and there's no musical guest the first night. The second night, the musical guest is Radiohead. And it doesn't go great. He's nervous, Conan, and weird, and his affectations aren't lovable yet because we don't know them. So in 1993, as he's doing all this, people were like, this is not good. And he does benefit because Chevy Chase had his show and that went even worse. So he's better than Chevy Chase, but he's not doing great. Um, and so the early days are a mix. They're a mixed bag. Sometimes he's figuring it out. The writers are stepping up. The sketches are going well. The interviews are taking their time. But a big interview that happens in '94 is Letterman. Letterman likes the show and wants to support him. So he comes on it, and he's like back at NBC, which is a big deal. Especially because in those days, Conan was on a 13-week contract. Everybody was on 13-week contracts, and at one point it looked like they were canceled. They were all but canceled, but they didn't have anybody else planned. They didn't have a backup. So even though he was probably canceled, he kept doing shows, and there's new contracts and all that. And then eventually longer contracts would happen. And there'd be notable guests, notable actors, of course, all the sketches I mentioned there. Guest stars coming in to do bits. Amy Poehler reoccurring. A lot of people from the Upright Citizens Brigade coming to do Conan bits over the years. Andy Daly was a standout. Of course, Jack McBrayer was certainly a standout. He was an intern for Late Night that eventually became reoccurring. He would play Jack the Page, the NBC Page. And then eventually, of course, he's on 30 Rock as Kenneth the Page, a character pretty much written for Jack McBrayer, which is just fun. So a lot of stuff happens on the show. There was a long history of incredible stuff and not so incredible stuff. On location shoots, going to other countries, and all this stuff. And how did it end? Well, it ended in 2009 because Jay Leno was... depending on who you talk to, either Jay Leno was leaving or Jay Leno's contract was up and it was time for Conan to take over the Tonight Show. Did Leno want to really leave? Did NBC really want Conan to take it over? Were they going to do it because they had to? Yeah. Anyway, I did not go to his very last show, but the only episode of Late Night with Conan O'Brien that I saw in person was his very last week. I pulled in a favor from a friend of mine who was still a staff writer at the time, saying, hey, Conan has like 2 weeks left. I would love to see it live. I just never have. There's always be something wrong. Also, I should say my own personal history. I was supposed to be in a Late Night with Conan O'Brien bit, and I did not get to do that bit. That bit was canceled. And then years later, when it was just Conan, he was shooting in New York, and I was supposed to be in another bit that they had to cut it because it involved too many people. And both times, I was supposed to be a nerdy Jedi, and I didn't get to do it either time. And in fact, when called in about the Conan thing, the person that contacted me said, "Hey, have you done Late Night?" And I was like, "No." It's like, "Okay, you're on a list." I was like, "Yeah, there was a sketch that got cut. It was also a Star Wars bit," and she was just like, "That's probably why you got recommended." And I was like, yeah, it might be. But that's my own personal history. I did get to see an episode, and that was really fun to go to see that taped live. And then I did see Conan tape an episode at San Diego Comic-Con. So I've seen him a couple times. Yeah, I mean, like... it was a thing that a lot of my friends got to do bits in. I, of course, later would do some stuff for Fallon in his late night show. And I was happy to do that as well. But yeah, I mean, it felt like a rite of passage as a comedian in New York that you would get a chance to do some bits there. There were plenty of writers that you've never heard of that came through, that worked there years and years. Other people you'd be surprised spent any time there. Like Dimitri Martin. Did for a spell and kind of like left to focus on stand-up, which, sure. But there were plenty of people that was just their job for a very long time, and they followed him to LA, and then some came back, some stayed out there, some went on to do other things. Some writers disappeared into obscurity, worked or left and came back. It's a whole thing. But that's Late Night with Conan O'Brien. A fantastic show. The bits still hold up. TeamCoco.com has a lot of good stuff that you can check out. And please do. And also in the comments, please let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know what you'd like to see me cover next. I'm shooting this in the afternoon, so the lighting is a little less than ideal in here because I can't really control my lighting as much as I would like to, but I hope that's okay. And again, I apologize for pausing the recording because there was a weird sound. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.